So here we're doing the other part of the estuary information about the Chesapeake Bay, and this is actually going to cover life in the bay and then the problems that are going on in the bay right now. So for the organisms that can survive in the extremes of an estuary, thinking about the different temperatures, the changes in the salinity, the changes in the oxygen levels, there actually is a pretty good amount of different types of organisms that live in the bay. There are a whole bunch of organisms, over 3,600 living organisms, 2,700 are plants, 348 types of finfish, and 173 different types of shellfish. Marsh dwellers, here's where the notes pick up. Marsh dwellers are located in and around tidal mud flats. Basically where the tide goes in and the tide comes out, that's a muddy area. So that's what's called a tidal mud flat. They include small fish, birds, and marsh grasses. Anything that frequents that area could be what's called a marsh dweller. SAV communities, submerged aquatic vegetation, that's what SAV stands for, are important for many reasons. They include ducks, crabs, and eel grasses. The plankton community includes the drifters of the bay. So here's a picture of jellyfish. Anything that's not stuck in a certain place can count as plankton. And we know that to include, of course, plankton itself, like phytoplankton, bacteria, and zooplankton. And then the benthic community is anything that lives on the bottom of the bay. Benthic includes oysters, clams, barnacles, and mud crabs. Nekton communities refers to the swimmers of the bay, many of which use the bay as a nursery. If you think about salmon, usually they talk about spawning upstream, but a lot of different organisms, not necessarily salmon, come into the bay from the ocean in order to use the bay as more of a safer place as a nursery to raise the young. The Bay Area is home to over 15 million people. And there are about 50,000 commercial vessels that enter the bay each year. So that's a lot of traffic in and out that creates a whole lot of problems. And you guys know about boating and water skiing and all kinds of different stuff that you can do in the bay, as well as all of these vehicles coming in. And the pollutions and all kinds of stuff put a big strain on the ecology of the bay. And then getting into some of the problems that we have in the bay. Nutrient pollution. Fertilizers and manure add nitrogen and phosphorus to the bay, and the fertilizers cause increased algal growth, which can form algal blooms. A lot of the times in the summer, you might hear in the Gulf of Mexico or even in the Chesapeake Bay, aerial photos you might see of an algal bloom, and it'll be this big colorful area of algae, and it's alive and it's thriving because of all of these extra nutrients that have gotten out into the bay that shouldn't be there. Algae block sunlight for those bottom dwellers, so then they can't get light, so then they die. And then as the algae dies, because it's seasonal, it uses up the oxygen in order to decompose. And then there's not enough oxygen left for the fish and all of the other animals that live in the bay, so then they die. And it's a big vicious cycle. And then here are some of the sources of nutrients that go into the bay. Urban areas. This is your picture for the urban area. Cities are essentially urban areas. Urban means cities. And then farms. If you think about the Eastern Shore, they have a lot of chicken coops, and the Purdue farms are over there. So you've got a lot of waste from chickens. And then people, wastewater treatment plants. Whenever you flush the toilet, whenever you take a shower, all of that water goes to a wastewater treatment plant. And there's actually one very near the school over by the park. And that water gets treated and then put out into the waterways after it gets treated. And if any part of that process gets messed up, water that may not have been completely treated can wind up out into the waterways. The loss of submerged aquatic vegetation, or SAVs, like we talked about before, The plants that are found on the bottom of the bay provide food and shelter, and these plants are dying because of pollution and sedimentation. When you till up the soil and then it rains on it, some sediments will get taken down from runoff, right? And then that extra sediment goes out into the bay and covers up some of these SAVs, and then they die because they get covered up. And then some pictures of SAVs, the crab, and then the grasses here. And then some toxins. Harmful chemicals can be added to the bay from industries, roads, homes. Examples would be pesticides when you want to kill bugs, and then herbicides when you want to kill weeds, paint removers, oil products. A lot of the times people think that when they want to get rid of these types of chemicals, they can just go out to the street and dump them out and then throw away the container, but you can't do that. They have to be treated specially so that they don't go out into the roadways. If you've been to Busch Gardens in the last couple of years, if you ever look near one of their drains, they have a little picture and it shows you a fish and it says leads to the bay, no dumping. And then pollution sources. Point sources are pollutants, or when we know that a pollutant comes from a certain place, because think about it like this, you can point to where it comes from, like a factory. You can point to a factory and say, you're producing pollution. Whereas a non-point source, you don't actually know where the pollution is coming from, like farm runoff or sediment, that sort of thing. Again, thinking about the Eastern Shore, there are a lot of farms there, and you can't say, well, Mr. Such and Such's farm is putting out this pollution, and their next door neighbor doesn't have anything to do with it. You can't say that yet because you don't know. And then last thing, exotic species. Some plants and animals were accidentally introduced into the bay, like the zebra mussel, the snakehead fish. That's exactly what it sounds like. It's a fish, but it's got a snake-like head to it. The water milfoil and the rapa whelk. These things don't have any natural predators, so there are too many of them, and then they just reproduce and reproduce and reproduce, and then there's nothing to take them out and get rid of them. And then here's a picture of the zebra mussel. That's exactly what it looks like, is a zebra, except it's a mussel.